Please welcome the visual effects producer Richard Graham and the special effects supervisor on the movie, Neil Corbould. Neil, nice to see you. Richard, there we go. So, gents, welcome and congratulations. I mean, Neil, you've just won a BAFTA with an Oscar nomination as well. So, congratulations now, first of all.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I heard that you're heading out to LA. Is that right? Heading out next
LA
week?
on Sunday. Straight into another awards, the Satellite Awards.
Okay.
So it's going to be a long day,
but a good day.
but a fantastic
It's going to be
day,
a good one.
hopefully.
So let's outline briefly for the people who don't know your roles on the film. Neil, let's start with you.
My role on Gravity was I was the special effects supervisor, the practical side. So any of the rigs that the actors were in, or any like turntables or revolving sets or anything like that, I was in charge of the concept, and my team, or the design and the build of those rigs.
Mm-hmm. And Richard?
So I was a visual effects producer, and I was charged with ensuring that the visual effects happened on time. And unusually for Gravity, we got involved right before the film was shot, so I worked on it for the full 3.5 years that we were involved on it.
Yes.
And the job is basically managing the 400 people that contributed to the visual effects.
Alfonso Cuarón has said that effectively the post-production on this movie had to happen before the production could begin, which is obviously very unusual. Can you talk us through that process, exactly what that entailed and what the visual effects in this movie entailed?
So what we did was we prevised the whole film, which is quite common on big visual effects films now, but we prevised it to a much higher level of detail than most previs is done, because the shots were so long, and we had to work out each section of photography that we could shoot, because obviously we didn't shoot 12-minute shots. So that process had to be done in a great deal of detail. We then also had to work out all of the lighting. So we animated the whole film, and then we rendered an animation version of the film. And I think when the Blu-ray comes out, some of that behind-the-scenes material will be shown. Once the lighting was done, we worked out what the robot camera would have to do. So we then kind of animated the robot camera to do the right camera move for the photography. And then we went to shoot it. So that was the process before we started shooting. So make the film once in animation, make it again in lighting, and then finally make another version that is all the robot moves.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we had the previs, but then we took it a step further with the technical previs.
Okay.
So basically, it was like a drawing board layout. So you'd have a front elevation plan and a side elevation of the animation going through with the camera, with our rigs, and it was literally every single frame had to be worked out. Because you would run the animation and you get to a certain point and you find the camera couldn't quite get to that right position. So then we had to make the rig so that turned and tilted so we could get the head in the right place.
Oh, that's interesting. Because I believe that when Alfonso came up with this idea, he thought it was going to be quite easy to make this film. And then he realised very, very quickly that the effects technology wasn't quite there. You effectively had to invent it, didn't you? I mean, is that...
Yeah, I mean, our first meetings was in a little cafe in Notting Hill. And he said to me, I want to do it all practical. I want to build these massive sets, 60 foot high, on the James Bond stage, and I want to spin it all round, and I want the actors coming down on wires and going through the corridors, and it'll be great.
And you thought?
And I said, great, fine, no problem at all. Went away, scratching my head, phoned up Tim and said, what the hell are we getting ourselves in for?
This is Tim Webber.
Tim Webber, yeah. And then the second meeting, Tim was there and we was all there, and it became very apparent very soon that we couldn't do it all practically. CG was the way to go, but with a big practical element in there to help it along.
And that big practical element not only is the rigs you're talking about, but this Lightbox as well. I don't know, Richard, if you can explain what the Lightbox is that was created for this movie.
So we tried out some kind of standard wire rigs to begin with, but the trouble with those is people can only really kind of rotate in one or maybe two axes, and a lot of the animation we'd done had the characters tumbling in all three axes. So Tim Webber's solution to that was, okay, what if we don't move the actor, but move the light around them to simulate them tumbling in three axes? So we then looked at ways of very quickly moving lights like putting them on the end of robots and spinning them around the actors. Got to the point where we thought maybe that'll work for some shots, but then on others, you'd have to have 2 robots, one for the Earth and one for the sunlight.
Okay.
And those robots would crash into each other. So then I think it was Chivo, the cinematographer, was at a concert, and he saw this light moving across the crowd and had the idea to try LED panels. And so he sort of proposed the idea of using LEDs, and Tim and Neil worked out how best to put them around the actor and have a rig in the centre that could rotate the actor within that sphere of light around them.
Because one previous way to I guess, achieve the effect of space or zero gravity in previous years has been to take the Fomet comet, which is where I believe you fly up in space and then you can shoot zero grav for a few minutes. That wasn't possible in this movie because of the takes.
They went out there and did the tests. I think they did like 50 parabolic curve drops, and I think it made them feel very sick and decided that it probably wasn't the best idea. The other thing as well is that they couldn't get the length of shot either. It's such a short period. By the time you get everything ready, the shot's over, especially with Alfonso and his very long takes. So again, that was crossed off the list quite early on.
Okay, so we actually have a clip now from the film which I think illustrates the Lightbox, which was known as Sandy's Cube, ultimately, I believe. Is this
Sandy's
true?
Cage, I think.
Sandy's Cage, yes. In action, this is a scene of Dr. Rhinestone just after things go horribly wrong. Let's take a look at the clip. Amazing stuff, indeed. So guys, I don't know if you can talk us through that shot, exactly what's real in that shot.
Just her face.
Just her face.
Not even the inside of the helmet behind her head is real. The bubble, the dome over the top isn't real, and none of the breath on the glass is real either.
Wow. Okay. And can you talk about the rig that you built then that allowed Sandra Bullock to be spun around?
Well, there was a mixture of our rig and the camera moving.
The robot camera.
Yeah. So we had like a Tilt Plus, which was basically this like cone-shaped metalwork which could spin her and tilt her on many axes, on three axes. So
And the robot camera was called, I believe...
Well, it was the KUKA.
Okay.
The KUKA. It's the robots they use for car manufacturing, which was adapted and an interface designed and built to basically... So the camera could talk... the robot could talk to our rig, and they all run together in sync.
I also think I read somewhere that the camera could go up to 20 miles an hour.
Yes, it's quite frightening, actually, yeah. We didn't really try and do that too many times. Cause it did what it said on the tin, but it's just quite scary when that comes flying at you and stops an inch from your eyeball.
An inch? Okay, and
yes, it could. Yeah.
That's real Sandra Bullock. It's flying towards 20 miles an hour.
Yes.
And what would have happened had it not stopped?
I would rather not go into that. Really. It doesn't bear thinking about.
We need another Sandra Bullock quickly. And Richard, can you talk about, I guess, the challenges of this? At what point did you realise, and Alfonso realised, that this was going to have to be done this way? That you could only really use Sandra's face?
It was really Tim Webber advocating almost full CG solution, and sort of very boldly saying, I think this is the best way to get the camera and the actors into the configurations that you need to make this film. You could have compromised the shots and done them in a different way, cut them, gone up in a Vomit Comet and had shorter shots, but doing it with as much CG and with the new rigs that were developed was really the only way to do it.
And how did the actors take to that? Because I imagine that was quite stringent for them, that he had to basically maintain the same movements again and again, take after take. Is that true?
That is true, yeah. And they were both incredibly good at it. Sandra has a dancing background, so she was very good at hitting specific marks. Like in that clip that you saw there's actually 3 separate pieces of photography all blended together, and we just blend the face seamlessly. We hide in the shadows a little bit, but she was very, very good at getting into a pose on one day, cut the camera, come back maybe a couple of days later, get back into that same pose again, and start the move again.
She was very good in our rigs, especially the 12-wire rig. We did many months of rehearsals with the stunt lady, and she was good. But when Sandra got in it, she really brought it alive. It's like any mechanical rig. You get certain positions where it sort of doesn't quite look right, but with her movement and everything, it it just came together really smoothly.
What is a 12-wire rig?
A 12-wire rig is something we came up with. Normally, you hang somebody from the hips, and it's quite a lot of strain on them, because they've got to try and keep a sort of a level sort of body. So I came up with this idea that we'd hang her from the shoulders and both hips with 12 wires, so it's 4 wires from each, triangulating up to a series of winches above her. So we could basically puppeteer her, but with the triangulation, it's so solid. Right. So we had puppeteers that did the Warhorse up in London here, came in. Really? Yeah, well, because we can build the rig. We tried to operate it ourselves, but we wasn't too good at it. Okay. We're great at building the technology, but sometimes we can't actually work it.
Do you ever get in the rigs you build for actors? Have you ever tried the harnesses and the 12 wires yourself?
Oh, yeah. No, that's the early stages. We test it all ourselves to make sure that it's sort of safe and that it does what it's supposed to do. Okay, because a lot of actors, not so much recently, but a lot of actors complain of pain in the harness area. Perhaps is that? Yeah, and we take that into account. We get them in it as soon as possible. And we sort those problems out, and that's where with Sandra, we had a good 6 weeks before we started filming, so we could iron out all those little wrinkles. You tend to get that when the actor comes in and says, "Oh, I don't need that. Just it'll be fine." And then as soon as they get in the rig, they complain a bit. Okay, well, we actually have I think a glimpse of the 12-hour rig in action now, because there's another little brief clip. This is a behind-the-scenes clip that might open some eyes. Let's take a look. Slight spoiler at the end there. I don't know if you noticed that. Has everyone seen Gravity? I hope you have. Okay, so back with the smartest guys in the room now. So there was an amazing moment in that little clip there where someone was hitting Sandra Bullock with a broom. Can you talk us through what exactly was going on there? It was just to create a believable impact. Okay. When she's supposed to be hitting the wall, so we found that was sort of the best way to do it, and Sandra was up for it. So,
and that was those puppeteers from Warhorse that were okay. That was one of their jobs, but not too harsh, I'm guessing. Okay, did Alfonso insist on that as well? Because I imagine he insisted on a lot of realism and a sense. I read one quote where he said he wanted this to feel like a documentary about space that had slightly gone wrong. So did he insist upon that sort of verisimilitude? Yeah, I mean, Alfonso he's a perfectionist, and he'll want to get that performance any way he can, within reason, any way he can, safely. And so it's little things like that just make the shot, Mm-hmm. And it was just knocking her head back in that scene, Mm-hmm. Which sort of sold the shot. Absolutely. So how long did it take? This was shot in 2 sections, wasn't it, Richard? I don't know if you can talk about that. Shot in 1 section. Okay. But we did about nearly a year before we shot, which was the animation version and the robot, working out what the robots were going to do. And we shot for, was it about 6 months? Yeah. And then post-production was 18 or 20 months for us. So okay. All in all, I think getting on for 3 years. And for Alfonso, longer than that. Yeah, we did have some additional photography, probably about 8 months after. Okay. But that was more of a dialogue change, and it was just like a week of additional stuff. Hopefully you hadn't dismantled all the rigs, or the Lightbox wasn't... No, we had. Okay. We had dismantled everything, and most of it was in the bin. But okay. We managed to scramble enough together to get what they needed. Was there ever a moment for both of you working on this movie, and I guess this happened probably earlier in the process, when you thought, there's something on this we can't quite get right, there's something we can't quite achieve? Basically every day, really. especially at the beginning. Yeah. It was just... and to be honest, when we first started shooting, there was still a lot of stuff that wasn't worked out. That sort of evolved as we went along. Such as? Well, a lot of the stuff in the Lightbox, because originally the Lightbox was just the Tilt Plus rig inside, and then we ended up putting sets in there to get other shots, wire rigs in there. So it just evolved as we went along. And Richard? Sorry, what was the question? Anything that was difficult, anything you thought was impossible, even deep into production? No, or is nothing impossible for you guys? We always had quiet faith that we'd get through it just by breaking it down into small pieces, solve each problem, and then put them all back together into the whole, really.
were you conscious at the time as you came up with all this technology, the Lightbox, which Time magazine voted one of the 25 greatest inventions of 2013, by the way, the Lightbox, the rigs, that future filmmakers would be taking this technology and using it for other purposes? Is that something that dawned on you, or you thought of as you were doing it?
Not really, because you're sort of in the moment. You know, you're designing and stuff for that movie. Once we sort of finished and we saw the result, then you can see it. I mean, we've had a lot of inquiries about the 12-wire rig. Even recently as this week. Of using it for different applications. So it's good.
And what about the Lightbox, Richard?
Yes, there were a couple of films have thought about building lightboxes, talking about building them even bigger so that you can have several people in them at once and almost have it as a replacement for filming people on a green screen.
Okay. That's interesting, because you can run there's LED lights, and you can run different things on the walls.
Yeah, so you could have an evolving lighting environment around them rather than, having to do flames and things like that. We did simple things. Like in the clip you saw there where she smashes through the solar panels, we just played some video of flames on the light box, and that provided the flickering light that goes across her face.
And so only one person could get into the light box at one time?
I think we did one setup where the two of them were together, where they're sort of doing the ballet around each other, but most of the time it was just the one. And then it's testament to them that sometimes we would film them separately in the light box, but in the film they're together, and they would have to, convince the audience that they weren't acting to nothing, which they were really good at.
Okay.
and with the light box as well, we designed it in such a way where you could pull panels out and push panels in. It just take one section out, or take the whole wall out, or the whole side moves in. Chivo wanted as much control as possible over the light. Yeah. So and the maximum amount of light on the artist as well. And I think, in the future, LED technology is just getting better and better. So, you'll almost be able to, in years to come, you'll almost be able to have a photorealistic backing in there.
Fantastic. We have one more clip from the film, then we'll take questions from you guys. And I think, Richard, you set this one up quite nicely. This is Ryan Stone and Matt Kowalski ballet dancing with each other in space. Let's take a look at the clip. Intense stuff.
Still exhausting watching it.
So again, just to reiterate, because it blows my mind every time, just a face. Okay, that's weird. Okay, so let's take some questions now for Richard and Neil. Yes, please, right here in the front row.
For young people with a practical kind of mind that enjoy building things, there doesn't seem to be a lot of encouragement. But when you see stuff like this, you go that there's a place for it to go. Do you guys have any sort of advice for young people who want to break into something like this, and maybe what's your story? How did you guys begin?
I think there's a big place for practical stuff, practical effects. I have to say 25 years ago, they told me, there was a visual effects supervisor that told me that within 5 years practical effects would be non-existent and it wouldn't be a job to get into. So I'm quite happy to say after all this time, it's still very much a major part of filmmaking. And depending on the director as well, it can create a massive part of a movie, like in The Dark Knight and that sort of stuff, massive practical effects. Young people coming through, I would suggest to them is, go to uni, get a degree in engineering or something like that, because we're always looking out for the next talent coming through. We want people that are enthusiastic, that are hard-working, and that are just dedicated to what we do. And, there's a big part to play for practical effects.
And Richard, how did you get your start?
I just reiterate what Neil said. I actually started, I have a degree in engineering, and the basis that gave me in just general problem solving has been invaluable over my career. So I can't recommend that more highly as a good place to start.
And Neil, I actually believe you got your start, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were taken on a tour of the set of Superman the movie. Is this true by your uncle?
Yeah, my uncle was the special effects supervisor on Superman the movie. And I bugged him for weeks to take me in and to let me have a look. And the first set I saw was The Forces of Solitude, which was built in the James Bond stage at Pinewood. and I walked into the stage, and it was all mist and ice and everything, and then I saw Christopher Reeves fly down the length of the Bond stage on wires, and from that point on, I knew this is what I wanted to do.
Oh man, amazing. Yes, please, sir. Thank you.
My neurons, those that remain, have gone into overdrive, having learned that you're just working on the face and reconstructing everything else around that. And the question that then pops into my head is, how long before certain scenes we actually dispense with the actor altogether, because we've already taken a 3D representation of their face and various expressions, and we can just completely, or not we, you might be able to completely overlay then that onto a dummy. So, you know, you could have actors doing things that normally you wouldn't want to because they're too dangerous, or, you know, it would just be physically impossible for them, but everything is CGI.
So we already did that in the film. There are bits where they're so far away and their heads are sort of a 1/10 of the screen height, where we're comfortable doing a fully CG face. It's still driven by a performance from the actor. We had this system called Mova, which is an array of 42 black and white cameras and 5 color cameras. The 42 black and white cameras capture per frame geometry, so it's like a depth scan of the face. The 5 color cameras capture the textures, and that was then used to put a head into a helmet in a shot that was further away. So it's kind of already done, but you know, we're not yet brave enough to bring it right close to camera. Although it was used for Benjamin Button, and you know, not throughout a whole film, but it can already be done to a certain degree.
I also think that Gravity works because of that practical element of her face, and that's why I think it looks so good. I really do, and I don't think it will never take over. You know, you can produce CG faces, but I haven't seen one that's that close up, which is that convincing. So I think, you know, and the performance as well. You'd never get a performance out of a CG complete character that you would out of like Sandra and George gave in this.
Absolutely. Yes, please. I think there's a gentleman right here at the front.
You won an Oscar for Gladiator. In that film, Ollie Reed died during the film, and you had to create another one. Can you tell us about that one?
Well, it was still his face. They took certain scenes and they just changed it around a bit. So and it was more of a face replacement on another actor. And they were clever with it, because the scenes that he had to shoot remaining were a lot more, and then Ridley basically simplified his part in it, and the story still made sense. So it was his face, and there was a lot of, like, you see the back of his head and him walking away, which was another actor.
Any more questions for Richard or Neil? Yes, please, right over here. Thank you.
Hi, first of all, congratulations on your award wins and nominations. I'm a film student, so this is a kind of a bit of an academic question, but I've been reading a few articles on the interwebs and whatnot that films like Gravity perhaps raise the question of whether we should rethink like terminology and awards categories now. For example, should we have separate cinematography awards for films like Gravity and 35mm films? Should a film like Gravity have separate awards for VFX and cinematography when isn't the cinematography entirely a visual effect? I don't have an opinion either way. I just think, do you think this film raises interesting questions like that about whether we should rethink the way we talk about cinema?
Well, we do have a special category for visual effects. Visual Effects Society have their own awards. So and that is sort of broken down into probably 26 different awards for animated, character, virtual cinematography. It goes on and on, doesn't it? The different. So in a way, there are different award categories. I think with the Oscars, or the BAFTAs, if you start breaking it down too much, you'll have a show that would start at sort of 1 o'clock in the afternoon and go on till probably 1 o'clock in the afternoon the next day.
Yeah, I think in actually a lot of the press around this film, the filmmakers have been very clear in stating that it's actually a collaboration between cinematography and visual effects. Chivo Lubeski, the DP, actually worked with the visual effects artists at their desks to light the shots. So it's not as though he was entirely divorced from the process. completely the opposite. He was heavily involved in it, and he had the same. We actually gave him the same creative tools that he's used to having on set. So we had a system of lighting where he said, I want such and such a light on their face, and we could bring in an approximation of that in CG, and it would respond in a way that he'd be used to seeing, and really it was his creativity that we were facilitating just with tools that were digital, not practical.
Yeah, and he sort of played God for a bit, because he said he loved it because he could move the sun 20 million miles to the right and up a bit.
Because that was one of Alfonso's stipulations, wasn't it? That the camera, there was no up, there was no down, there was no left, there was no right. That must have been, was that either incredibly freeing from your point of view or very tricky?
It was okay because we had the previs. We sort of knew what we were doing, and it's the camera and the animation that makes that gives you that sort of effect.
It was very difficult in previs because you're used to speaking at that point. Everyone was thinking, okay, well, this is just a normal movie. Up is up, down is down. And once we kind of hit that, it became very difficult. Like we tried to do some shots using motion capture cameras.
Okay.
And as soon as you hold it and you're standing on the floor, it looks like the camera of someone standing on the floor. So we had to come up with ways of sort of suspending our motion capture camera on elastic and flying it around the room, just to provide some of that kind of zero-G-ness to it.
Absolutely amazing. Any more questions for Richard and Neil? Yes, please. Over here. Thank you.
Aside from the Lightbox and the 12-wire rig, what other new technologies did you have to develop to make the film?
Robots, I think. They've been used in a small amount on some films, and motion control cameras are really nothing new. But I think it's the first time that car plant robots have been used as heavily, and actually integrating all those things together. As Neil said, the robot could speak to the rig so that they were always in the right position on every frame. And then they actually spoke to the lighting as well, so that every time we went to that particular frame, the lighting was always in the same position.
What's it like at the moment inside the effects industry? Do you guys share technology with other companies, or is it very much keep yourself to yourself and butt out ILM?
No, there's lots of academic papers that everyone is quite pleased to write and share their ideas. Everyone has a little bit of secret sauce, but also that we're all trying to develop new things, and in many cases we're all trying to develop the same thing, just with different groups of people working together. Okay. And then there are times when we work on films where we're very collaborative with other companies. They might create one character, we might create another, and then we'll swap them over and use them both in our shots.
It's the 90% rule. you tell them 90% of it, but don't give them the 10%.
Yeah.
And Neil, I wanted to talk about you as well, because your brother Chris is in the same industry, the same business, the same field, in fact.
Yes, he's my direct competition.
Yes, how competitive are you?
We're all right, actually. No, it's very rarely we get offered the same movie, so that's good. But Chris has, he's done a lot of the Bonds and the Batmans over the last few years, and then I get all the good stuff.
Have you ever thought about joining forces to make one giant Corbould who just dominates the industry?
No, I don't. I think our egos are too big. No. We've got our own way of doing things, so it's just good to remain brotherly love.
What's Christmas like?
Christmas is quite good. Yeah, it's quite entertaining.
Do you have massive rigs delivering turkey to the table, or is it
I had
just
this 12-wire rig that brought the turkey to the table and just sort of
all in one bite? Any more questions for the guys?
I wanted to ask about the movements of the body in space. How realistic are they? I mean, how close to reality? Because I think you have to study, the actual whatever.
Yeah, we studied lots and lots of video footage from the space station and stuff like that. And I think if it convinced the audience, then it's good. Obviously it's not 100%, but I think it's close enough where the audience got it.
Because again, I guess a feeling of weightlessness was tricky to achieve in terms of the rigs.
It was, because in zero G in the past, you can see them straining, and the the angle of the body doesn't look quite right. So, and that's really why we came up with a 12-wire rig, to give her as much support and flexibility as we can, as we could, and for her to not strain too much. And I think we achieved that.
Fantastic. Yes, please. There was a gentleman here. Thank you.
When you've got a team of 400 people working on a film like this, and as you said, you're inventing technology as you go along, how do you stick to budget?
You work out at the beginning that you need those 400 people for 3 years, and then that sort of defines your budget.
Interesting. And Neil?
Well, I didn't quite have 400, I have to say. I had more like 16 people in my department for gravity over that period. So that was a few times we had to go back to the producers and say, can we just have a little bit more money just to finish this rig off? And it worked out.
What about things like unexpected wrinkles? If you said your budget at the beginning of the 3-year process, but what if something comes up during that you didn't quite foresee, or it might cost more money than you anticipated? How do you deal with that?
Well, I think, I don't know, I don't want to speak for the studio, but I think that they understand that things do change as a film gets made, and they obviously have plans and contingencies in place to deal with that, so that when we come to them and say, look, genuinely, this is more work, a decision is made, shall we make this change or shall we not? Like Neil mentioned, we had to go back about 8 months later and just have another week of shooting to update some scenes to improve them. Those things are not in the plan at the outset, but there is something set aside for those kind of things that happen.
Okay. Any last questions? Yes, there's 2 more here, right in the front row, and then there's a guy in the second row.
Without spoiling the end for anyone, but when Sandra does return to our planet, was that all CGI, or was
How's
it
that not a spoiler?
You showed it as well.
That's true, fair enough.
Was it all CGI, or was it shot in Iceland or something like that?
No, that was shot at Lake Powell in Utah in the States. I think the water there is quite nice and warm, so it was nice for Sandra to spend a couple of days in there rather than in somewhere freezing like Iceland. And the hot pools in Iceland we looked at, but they're really sulphurous and horrible, so she didn't want to spend too much time, and nobody would want to spend too much time in one of those. Once we got the photography back, it was very much like Utah. It was very brown and orange, so all of the greenery was created in CG, but she was really stood in that place, and then we just added lots of plants and extra greenery on the hillsides and things like that.
Yeah, when the shuttle came down and hit the capsule, when it hit the water, that was in Staines. In a reservoir, and that was a 3rd scale miniature that came down and on a big crane rig with a parachute attached to it, and then when it got about a metre above the water, we hit these air jets that basically disturbed the water, and then Tim and his team just added some stuff to that as well.
That was a live practical effect then?
That was a live practical effect, yeah.
Fantastic. So you got Staines.
I got Staines, and then they got America. So.
When she lands, she's in Staines, and when she comes back up from under the surface, it's in Colorado.
No,
Utah.
that's movie magic. Yes, please, sir. Thank you.
Hey guys, congrats. So just 2 things. Like, first of all, how much of that is actually generated, like generated objects? So something like Earth, for instance, I'm assuming you don't actually generate the entirety of a side of Earth for every shot. So is that like from a background plate in a kind of projection mapping? And just my second thing is there's like no green screen in that, which I'm surprised by. It's all white objects or blue screen. Is there a specific reason for that?
Okay, first question, Earth, no, it is a CG asset that, because you could do matte paintings all the way through, but that would be a lot of matte painting, and so we made a fully CG asset. It's effectively the 3rd character in the film, and we simulated light scattering through the atmosphere, and then the artistry was in getting the right cloud formations and making sure that the colour of the Earth behind and the way the light was bouncing off the sea and everything was correct. So no, that's all a simulation. The lack of green screen was because for the scenes when they're in the space helmet, there's actually a hard line around them which we could use to rotoscope them out. So apart from in, I think, 2 plates, everything in the film was rotoscoped. And we couldn't really use green screen for any of the interior shots because when a light bounces off a green screen, it sort of spills a green light onto the performer, and we didn't want that. So we wanted to spill the right colour of light on. So when Neil said we could move the walls of the Lightbox in, we did exactly that. We moved the walls of the Lightbox in, and we played a render of what the interior of the space station would look like projected onto a cube around her, so that as the doors go past her, that's actually a render of the door going past her.
And Chivo, the cinematographer, he added filters and stuff to that as well, just to just to get the colour right.
Amazing. We got time for 2 last questions.
Hi, I was just wondering what was the most extravagant set that you built for the film out of all of the rigs, sort of the one that stands out as the most complex?
The most extravagant set was probably the capsule she's in, because that's the only one that's photoreal finished. Everything else was just plywood and kind of rough shapes, because it would be replaced with CG later. In terms of the most extravagant sets we built in CG, then definitely the interior of the space station. That was definitely the biggest, heaviest CG asset in the movie.
And Neil, what's the thing that makes you proudest about this film?
From our side, I think it was the 12-wire rig, because that had never been done on a human before. Yeah, we've done it with models, like a model movers with 9 wires, but to put a human in one of those rigs, that was sort of a first. And obviously, building the Lightbox was being part of that was very good.
Fantastic. One last question, if anyone has oh yes, a couple of hands up here. Yeah,
apart from this movie, what's the your favourite film you've worked on in terms of special effects?
That's a tricky one. I think for me, because I like blowing things up, it would probably be Saving Private Ryan. That was probably one of the most enjoyable ones for me, because it was just 8 weeks of blowing things up.
We could probably do 45 minutes on the beach scene alone, I imagine. And Richard, what about you?
After 3.5 years working on Gravity, I was quite pleased to jump onto Iron Man 3, because it only took us 6 months.
And what about now? What are you guys working on now, Richard?
I'm not working on... Actually, the last film I worked on is Edge of Tomorrow, the new Tom Cruise film.
Okay. And Neil?
I've got Hercules coming out, and also the Book of Exodus with Ridley Scott.
Fantastic. Fantastic indeed. And thanks, guys. Thank you all. Thanks so much for coming. Thanks for your questions.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Neil Corbould, Richard Graham. Thank you very much.